Good morning. Welcome to the Donnie Glover Show. We're here with Dr. Dallas Dance. Good morning, Dr. Dance.
Good morning, Donnie, my friend. How are you, man?
Man, I'm grateful.
You sound like
Pandemic,
me.
so much has changed. The last time I saw you, we were down at the Reginald F. Lewis Museum. It was you, me,
we
and Scott Phillips.
we were. Matter of fact, I had an opportunity to text with Scott a few weeks ago, so I know he's jumping into politics. He's always been there, but I'm eagerly looking forward to how the campaign shapes out. So yeah, Scott's a great friend, and went to matter of fact, we went to the same school. So our alma mater is Virginia Union University, right here in Richmond, Virginia.
The Virginia Union, that's a HBCU, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. 1865, right here in Richmond, Virginia. Very small, intimate campus. It has about 1,600 students if you look at the undergrad and the graduate level. But proud member of Alpha Phi Alpha from that university, and graduated in 2001 from that school. But very historic, and very much known for many of the religious leaders that it has put out into our world.
At Virginia Union, I visited the campus. We did a Black Wall Street event there in Richmond. And what a lot of people don't know is that, everybody knows about Tulsa's Black Wall Street, but I wrote a book talking about how those people got there. And one of the things I learned was about a woman from that city of Richmond, a place called Jackson Ward. They just did a
Jackson Ward,
statue for
they did.
Maggie Lena Walker.
Maggie Walker, and the Governor's School right here in Richmond that houses several of the brightest young people from across the region, from probably approximately 8, 9 different school systems, is right here in the city, down the street from Virginia Union. Is Maggie L. Walker Governor's School. So the historical nature of the city of Richmond is just amazing. And I always encourage people to come visit. And when you come visit, you have to come and visit places such as Jackson Ward, because the historical nature in and of itself will just put you back in a sense of time that you get so much jubilation, realizing that we've grown so much, but we still have a long way to go in the process.
I got to tell you, Dr. Dance, they took me through downtown Richmond past the courthouse and they showed me a tree and they told me the stories about the tree, Dr. Dance. I couldn't wait to get out of town. I was overwhelmed. They told me about the neck stretching and the lynchings that took place right there in downtown Richmond. Oh my God.
Yep.
I just as we went past the tree, I just remember it's almost like the ancestors were saying, we're speaking. We're speaking to me.
One of the things, and I'm very proud of Mayor Stoney, our city leaders, but also, we've had many people within the Virginia General Assembly that we've not run from the history here in the Commonwealth, even though we do have some individuals who are trying to take us a bit back now, and that's a conversation and a fight that we'll continue to make. But at the end of the day, I mean, everyone has to face the historical past that we had that in many cases has gotten us to where we are today. And when we try to run from that, it's only going to do further damage down the road. That's why, Donnie, I get so disappointed and I get so furious when I hear individuals who are trying to sort of rewrite history, even as it relates to what we teach our kids. At the end of the day, we rob not only Black kids, but white kids and all kids of having just critical thought, that we can give them information, they can synthesize that information, and they can make their own determinations from that. They're going to be leading our country in just a few short years, not us. And if we try to sort of whitewash that, if we try to forget that past even exists, or in some cases try to rewrite it, we're going to be we're going to be in a worse situation even in a few years than we are even today, let alone even where we were 50 or 100 years ago. But we do have a very brutal history right here in even Richmond, Virginia. And I think what you've seen, if you come back through here, if individuals visit, they'll see where the city is really trying to sort of put markers. They're trying to place history. They're trying to make sure that people understand and are aware of certain things that happen at certain places within our city that really has made the city where it is. But the city is not going to run from that. We became very known, as you know, for the Robert E. Lee Monument right here on Monument Avenue, where it became when George Floyd in the protest was murdered by Derek Chauvin and other officers. When that protest and those protests started happening, Richmond, Virginia became a centerpiece of that with the Robert E. Lee Monument, which was a very interesting history of how Monument Avenue just came to be. But those monuments are gone now. The pedestals are gone now. So the history that has brought us to where we are today, Richmond is not afraid to confront it and say that we're better than where we were in our past.
Now, also, and I learned this about the city of Oakland too, California. In my mind, I hear Richmond, I hear Oakland. I'm thinking like I would think in DC. I'm thinking Chocolate City. But Richmond's not majority black. Oakland's not majority black.
Yep.
DC's no longer majority black. I didn't know there were so few black people in Richmond.
There's still
my mind.
Well, there's still several black people in Richmond, but to your point though, and I think you see this across the country, we don't have to look as far as just Baltimore County in Maryland, where due to various issues, policies, practices, structures, and in some cases, some of the institutional structural systemic racist issues that have existed in some of our urban areas, gentrification absolutely is real. And so where you see many individuals and families of color, particularly black families who've moved to the suburbs, or a lot of times if you talk to families, and obviously I'm a parent myself, I have a seventh grader, 12-year-old, parents want choice when it comes to education. And there's always a perception, whether real or perceived, that the educational programs and systems are available in the suburbs and much more will give parents an opportunity to lift their students up and lift their child to a better platform. And you cannot blame parents for wanting to do that. So, even when I was superintendent in Baltimore County, we would have, and people didn't know this, but I would tell them all the time, we were a majority minority school system. And I hate saying that way, but that was the only way people would understand it, that, white students did not make up the majority of our students within that school system. And if you look at the trajectory of Baltimore County, or if you look at DC, or, even Prince George's County, you'll see that individuals have migrated from urban areas to suburban areas, which have made those areas particularly suburban urban, which that's why many of the conversations that school systems and districts have to have right now are serious conversations around race and equity, to make sure that as those demographics change, that our policies and our practices and our structures, we change along with them so that every single student gets an opportunity to be successful.
Doc, talk to me, as I think about these lynchings, I'm thinking about critical race theory. I'm thinking about how that weighs on the mind. It's easy for maybe the majority or some of the majority group to say, hey, we don't want to talk about that. We don't want to remember that. We don't want our kids to feel guilty. But what happens to the mental health component in all of that with all of this denial?
Absolutely. So Donnie, let's just be clear. And I have to say this to clients when I go meet with them. I said it when I was in public service, but the reality is when I leave the house in the morning and I look in that mirror, I'm still a black man. And that does not change. And that's not going to change whether I'm sitting in a meeting with, a student, a parent, or even the president of the United States, which has happened. At the end of the day, we have to recognize that truth is really what will sustain us as a country. And at the end of the day, the truth is that we have a very brutal history with our country. There have been things that have been done wrong to all of us, but particularly black people, that because we've not had the strength and the courage to address it, we're really in fear of repeating the same things. And in many cases, particularly when it comes to whether it's our education system or our healthcare systems, we are perpetuating some of the same inequities that we claim to want to fix. And that's a problem. When we think about this, though, individuals like you, myself, many activists, many people who are in public service, and even many everyday people, because of what we hear on the media, because of some of the things that we're not doing to really address head on what we've had to face as a country, we live that, we breathe it, and we get back home and we have to internalize it. And there are many people, Donnie, who can compartmentalize and they go about their day. At the end of the day, whether we attempt to compartmentalize well or we don't do it well, mentally, that still takes a toll on us. One of the things that I'm working on right now is creating a nonprofit that will really deal with mental health in the community, but particularly with men, Black men particularly, and with Black families. I really feel that obviously if we take care of Black men, we support Black women, which ultimately revitalizes and actually propels the Black family. And I'm in that class, obviously, and I've dealt with my own mental health, whether it's been, trying to live up to what society's, expectations are of you, or trying to sort of be perfect because that's what you feel that society wants from you or expects from you. Regardless of what that is, mental health comes in so many different forms. And if we don't take the opportunity to really address it, we're only going to repeat the mistakes of the past. But bigger than that, if we don't take the time to address it and take care of people, we're going to have people who are hurting more than we really know. And that leads to other bigger issues, whether it's suicide, whether it's drug use, whether it's alcohol abuse. And this is happening as early as 5 or 6 years old in some cases, because I was on the phone with a client. They were just talking about this just even yesterday. So we can't whitewash history. We can't forget about it. We can't just sweep it under the rug. It happened. And the moment we can admit that it happened, we recognize that we can be better from it, and our kids see us having an open and authentic conversation about it, then we'll be better off. But this whole idea around, critical race theory, and we're not going to teach X to our kids. Critical race theory is not taught in schools because it's just that. It's a theory. And it's the idea that comes obviously from law and from legal scholars, that at the end of the day, those types of factors would be weighed in whenever there's a legal situation or a legal incident that has to take place. But at the end of the day, I think educators are stronger, healthcare professionals are stronger, IT professionals are stronger, business professionals are stronger, and every other industry, Donnie, they're stronger when we can say, let's be honest, there's always an equity and, let's be clear, a racial lens that we do have to look at things through just to make sure that everyone is being treated fairly.
Now, I remember coming out there to cover some of your stories, but just before you got there, there was a school superintendent in Baltimore County named Joe Hairston.
Doc.
You said something in your previous comment about being perfect.
Yep.
How do you be perfect? How do you follow a Joe Hairston? How does a Black man run the educational system for one of the top counties in the state of Maryland and be normal? I mean, because white people are holding you to a certain standard. Black people are holding you to another standard. Your family's certainly holding you to a standard. Is it difficult to be perfect?
Well, absolutely. But let's be clear, there is no such thing as perfection. And I think that's where even my own evolution, my own growth has come in recognizing, and I put this in my second book, which is really just an open letter to my son called Imploded Universe, that there is no such thing as perfection. So the pitfalls of trying to be perfect, the fear of failure, those things right there are many of the things that we sort of put our leaders on a pedestal, hoping that they will sort of live up to a standard that is impossible. And in many cases, when that doesn't happen, then our hope gets lost and our hopes gets forgotten. But I remember, and I absolutely love Doc. I had an opportunity to interact with Doc before I became superintendent. Even had an opportunity to gain a few nuggets from him, even when I was a deputy superintendent and one of the chief school officers in Houston. So I've had an opportunity to really just pick his brain. And one of the things Doc told me very early on, he said, "Hey, my man, don't let this job make you think that you have to be something that you're not." And he said that very clearly. But also, Doc would also tell me that, "Hey, don't forget." And he held up that every time he had a chance to talk to me, he'd hold up the Baltimore Sun or the Washington Post, and he says, "Don't forget now, you could be on the front page of either of these papers, or both at the same time." And the toll that will play on whether it's you, individuals who look up to you in leadership professionally, or even your family, the impact and the toll that will take on you. But whether it's a superintendent, whether it's a politician that's sort of statewide or from a local area, there are nuggets that our constituents need us to share about a sense of just being human, being normal, being with them and recognizing that, yes, we do make mistakes. But in our society right now, Donnie, and I'm pretty sure you've seen this obviously in the work that you do, there's just this tear down culture. I think people are trying to look at it as, quote, a cancel culture now. But it's this tear down culture where we don't want to lift people up. In many cases, we don't want to lift our leaders up. Yes, we should hold them to high standards and want them to be held accountable. But the moment someone does something wrong, there's this idea that we have to tear them down. We have to rip them apart. We have to, show them, that they're not, perfect or whatever. And I think that those are things right there that are nuggets that Doc tried to teach me and other superintendents. That society, the more and more we talk to our leaders and interact with them, if we can just make sure that our leaders recognize that we don't expect perfection, we do expect them to perform, though.
I want to get back to that standard, but something else crossed my mind. Last Wednesday for me personally marked 37 years since my mother went on to glory. I was a sophomore in Morehouse. Spoiled. I won't say ungrateful, but for the sake of this conversation, ungrateful. But then life did a 180. It's kind of like getting a new edition of Microsoft Word. Everything used to be right there where you know it is. And then they just moved everything. Man. And I ran the streets. I chased everything. But at the end of the day, now here's the caveat that I didn't share with you. My dad was a funeral director. And I'm just saying, when that shoe is on the other foot, we had been servicing families all my life. But when that shoe went on the other foot, baby, oh baby, you went through something similar.
I did. And I'm very open, Donnie, with this, that for the last 7 years, I've struggled with my own issues of mental health, whether it was, trying to, or believing, I shouldn't say trying, but believing that I was carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders as superintendent in Baltimore County. I remember when folks would tell me, look, you're a young Black male doing this, don't F this up. And again, that's something I put very, very much in the book. And it's not just one person that would tell me that, but I could name over a dozen who said that and use those strong language, that strong language with me. But over the last 7 years, I've dealt with my own, whether it's been professional, setbacks I've had. My family's very small. My family literally is about 7 people. And so over the course of the last 5 years, I've lost my grandmother, who was the matriarch of our family. I've lost my mother. I've lost my uncle. I find solace in that when I go to the church cemetery. And I'm from Charles City County, a very small county, obviously in Virginia. But when I go to the church cemetery, I'm able to see all 3 of them literally by standing in one particular area. But when you have that much loss on top of a professional setback, you also have individuals who, in many cases, you thought were friends who may not have been friends. I'm a very relational person. So I've always viewed people from an idea of what can I do to support you, knowing that I care more about the relationship than the transaction. But when those types of losses add up, it's only fair to say that someone is going to deal with a mental challenge. And, at graduation, which was the best part, it is. And that person will be you, because in many cases, and I tell students every year at graduation, when I had an opportunity to go there, watch your thoughts because they become your words. And that's exactly true. Obviously it wasn't a quote that came from me, but every single day when I get up, and I encourage people to do this, you have to exercise your mind and your heart in that order. You can't go out of order. You can't exercise your heart without exercising your mind. Your mind has the ability to create so many barriers, but it also has the ability to break down so many barriers. And so in your mind, when you can say to yourself, look, I got this, it can be done. I am better than this. When you can mentally get that toughness that only comes with strategy, but it only comes with practice. It only comes in many cases with therapy and with counseling and with talking to someone to unpack what are the issues that we all deal with. Everyone has baggage, whether it's baggage that is stowed or whether it's baggage that goes overhead or baggage that goes underneath the seat. Everyone has baggage that we have to, in many cases, unpack. And it goes back, Donnie, almost to our conversation from earlier. When we decide not to share history with our students, or when we decide to, in many cases, not be upfront with them, and we don't want to share certain things with them, we are in unintentional cases creating baggage for them that they're going to have to unpack later on. because they're going to find out one way or the other. You know, as a parent, I can share with my child what I want him to know that absolutely is the truth, no matter how hard, you know, it is to tell him, or how difficult it might be for him to ask me questions that I'm going to have to answer with a 12-year-old. It's better for me to do that than for him to go online and get that information, which obviously, as we know, in many cases will be wrong, or even hear it from outside factors that are not people who have his true best interests of heart, like his father will have. And so I say that only to say that, you know, as adults, we recognize that we're having to unpack so much because of things that were not necessarily told to us, things that we may not have seen. And so I would only offer now that as I'm beginning this work around mental health and mental wellness and well-being in general, particularly for Black men, we've got to unpack some of those issues and get honest, not just with ourselves, but also with the next generation as well.
Doc, are you a victim or a victor?
I'm a victor. I definitely don't think I'm a victim. You know, there were things, and I've been very clear with people. I went into the superintendency, Donnie, as a 30-year-old. You know, it's hard to believe I'm 40 right now. So, you know, 10 years ago, I was stepping into Baltimore County as the superintendent, and you know, I was following Joe Harrison. To your point, which was, you know, by far known to many superintendents across the country as one of the greatest superintendents, particularly Black superintendents that there was. You know, nobody can argue the levels of academic achievement that happened in Baltimore County under Dr. Harrison. So following that, you know, I had a responsibility, obviously, to the citizens of Baltimore County, academically, instructionally, operationally, financially. Do I think that I left that system in a better place than it was when I got there? Absolutely. Were there mistakes that I made? Absolutely. You know, one of the things that I recognize very on is that as a leader, it's always better to be more transparent and disclose as opposed to less, regardless of how much you might be afraid or nervous or think that someone's going to come after you. You know, at the end of the day, we have a responsibility to individuals who put us in positions of power. And so to those individuals who, you know, who have said to me, look, you know, we feel that you broke the trust of individuals in Baltimore County, I can receive that. I can take that, and I can apologize for that as a man, as a Christian, as a son, because I still view myself as that, and as a man of God. But at the end of the day, I still believe that there is still more to do. There is still more work that must be done. I still think there's still more awareness that can be brought, just not from the educational side, but because my background is in corporate, and I still believe that there's a lot of work to do in healthcare that also obviously goes to the mental health and the wellness space too. There is still more work to do. And at the end of the day, because I'm still being sculpted, because I still evolve every single day, I will always view myself as a victor and never a victim.
Going forward, what do you want people to know about Dr. Dallas Dance?
Donnie, great question. Let's be clear. I think folks need to know about me, Sean Dallas Dance. That I'm a Christian. I'm a man of God. I'm a father. I still view myself as a son. I'm a brother. But I'm a person who truly believes in taking accountability. But I'm also a person that believes in still moving forward. At the end of the day, and I said this to a friend yesterday who is going through, you know, her own situation right now. At the end of the day, society is gonna beat you up. They're gonna beat the hell out of you. They're going to, in many cases, tear you down. At the end of the day, though, you can't do the same thing to yourself. There's a level of uprising we still have to do. It goes back to your earlier comment: are you a victim or are you a victor? And at the end of the day, there is one person that we're going to be held accountable to, and only one person can judge us. One of the things that folks don't know about me, it always was sort of this running joke in Baltimore County. But, you know, I do love tattoos. I have over 40 tattoos. And so one of the tattoos I have on me is "Only God Can Judge Me." And I didn't get that recently. I had that back in 2010 because I really believe that only God can judge me. Only God can judge any of us. And so individuals who are going through whatever it is, if society's going to beat you up, you can't do the same thing to yourself. I'm an individual who believes in people. I believe in myself. So we all have to put one step forward. We all have to keep moving. We all have to, as what we are hoping, and I know that God is going to make this happen when her confirmation is official. But Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson said it yesterday. We all have to persevere. And that happens when we do and follow the words, like Cory Booker said last night. Senator Booker was very poignant in his words to her, that, you know, there's still work that must be done. There are setbacks that happen. There are mistakes that that happened, but there is still work to be done. And I don't believe that anyone, whether it's myself or anyone who's committed any type of mistake or fail, they can get back up. I can get back up. We all can get back up, because again, work needs to be done, and society's going to be better when we're all working toward making it better.
Doc, what did it feel like going into prison?
You know, Donnie, I get asked that all the time. You know, at the end of the day, you know, it's mental. You know, your mind has to be strong, obviously, because you don't know what to expect. But at the end of the day, I think I had an opportunity to recognize that that everyone deserves a level of grace. I started my career as a teacher, and so when I went into the Henrico jail, literally I had the mindset of that as a teacher. While I did not think that it would evolve into that, it absolutely did. And so I had an opportunity to teach individuals there. I had an opportunity to meet individuals in there, recognize some of the mistakes that we all made, start working with individuals, include myself, on a strategy of what it would look like going forward. Because even though you might be in something in a moment, that does not mean that moment's going to stay there always. And if you don't use that time wisely, we're going to be worse off than you were before you came in. And so I had an opportunity to teach. What I do share with people, again, I put this in my book too, Donnie, is that it was very discouraging to me that while there, I had an opportunity to see two former students, two Black men. At that point, they obviously were men. They looked like me. We had an opportunity to talk about their experience in school, mistakes they had made. Obviously, I was very transparent, and folks who know me, Donnie, will tell you that I'm very transparent and very open these days. And so it was very disheartening to hear their experiences and some of the things I think that we thought they were learning that they didn't, but also how we thought they were prepared for their future and they weren't. And I've been able to take that.
What do you mean?
So one of the stories that I remember, one of the individuals telling me, and obviously I won't share his name for obvious purposes, but that, you know, he could not read, and that he still struggles with trying to learn how to read. And at that point, he was 29 years old. That's disheartening.
What did you think?
To me? How do you get through a system? What I think was, what the hell is wrong with me? What did I do wrong? What could I have done better? Because at the end of the day, there is no reason, whether you are Black, white, Hispanic, Latino, regardless of your race or your ethnicity, that you make it through 13 years in an educational system, you graduate, and yet we've given you a piece of paper and it does not mean anything. To me, that's disheartening. And I've used that, and it makes me furious, because obviously that's someone's son. And I took it personal, because obviously I played a role in that. I was this individual's English teacher when he was in 10th grade. And so I've taken that story to educators and said, okay, how do we make sure that individuals don't fall through the cracks, whether it's through making sure that we have them connected to people and counseling, whether it's making sure that we have, individual goals that they set, that we actually make sure we help them monitor, whatever it is. And I'm not saying that there's a one size that fits all. A Black man, a white man, a Hispanic or Latina female should never go through 13 years and be not, set up for success. And they've given us that time. Parents entrust us to provide the best level of service that we can for their young people. We have to make good on that. Yeah, there are roles and responsibilities of parents too, but we should never let people get through a system and not be able to read. And that was disheartening.
What could you have done?
So I beat myself a lot about.
It's like going back to a baseball game. Like, I was right there on third, and the hot one came there. How was I looking at the stands? Did you beat yourself up? I mean, because that had to be like a big spiritual moment where you like, you thought it was this way, and then, you thought you was going down a two-way street and there's a one-way street. What did you think when you found out, like, damn?
Yeah. When I first heard it, was almost like an Apollo moment where you say, Houston, we have a problem. And this is what I talk to people, even when they're in the mental health and wellness space. If we can admit that there is a problem, we have a better job of actually solving the problem. Our problem comes in many cases, we don't want to admit it. We want to sweep things under the rug. And so in this case, I said to myself, absolutely. Denial allows us not to confront, not to be honest, not to recognize the role that we might play in exacerbating an issue when we say we want to fix it. When I started the D Dance group, Donnie, one of the things that I recognized was that people came to me to solve problems, good, bad, or indifferent. And so I'm an optimist. I believe every problem can be solved. And so with over, I think we recorded our 41st client yesterday. With over 41 clients, the question I always ask myself is, how do we solve a problem if we really want to solve it? And there are a lot of problems, obviously, we don't want to solve. Every single problem, Donnie, can be solved through people and through strategy. Having the right people in place, making sure they have the right supports, they have the capacity or professional development they need. And obviously, everything needs to be matched with a strategy, because a goal does nothing without an appropriate strategy. And so I've used that to work with that school system that student graduated from, to say, how can we recognize that there's an issue and have people and strategy in place so that people don't fall through the cracks? Yes, I might have beat myself up as a 10th grade English teacher and said, how can I go back in the moment and what could I have done? But there are so many things also that could have happened along the way before that individual got to 10th grade. And so I use our services, our products, our relationships with districts or schools or even with corporations and nonprofits to say, okay, how do we get kids early on, whether it's third grade or fourth grade or even 3 years old, to make sure that there's systems of support in place so that students don't fall through the crack as early as we can do it.
Doc, we've not talked about a most important element in this whole equation of the student, and that's the parent.
Yep.
Baltimore County, majority minority school system. Many of the people out in Randallstown, Owens Mills, Catonsville, they come from West Baltimore. A lot of people move from inner city Baltimore to Northwest Baltimore County for better schools like Deer Park Middle School. But I've been to a Deer Park Middle School PTA meeting. There are like 7 or 8 people, 7 or 8 parents. Dr. Dance, what about the parent? You weren't
Absolutely.
the only one around that 10th grader, because now I'm wondering, could the parent read? Now I'm wondering if a dad was in the household. Now I'm wondering if the grandparents could read. It's the 21st century. Our ancestors coming out of slavery could read. What about the parent, Dr. Dance?
So, Donnie, I think you bring up a very critical and crucial point, that nothing will take the place of parents or of guardians, of caretakers, of individuals who care about young people and who consider a system of support that wraps around them. And so I'm not saying it has to be a parent or a grandparent or a caregiver or whomever it is. There needs to be systems of support around young people. But what I would say to that, Donnie, is that and we tried to do this in Baltimore County. Could we accelerate it quicker? Absolutely. But I think we started to do this. We started to look at ways that we engage families and communities, as opposed to looking at it from an area of just involving them. Involving seems like a transaction. You know, if I involve you, I'm telling you what you need to do. And so what I do when I engage you, though, is we talk about ways in which we both can partner together. And in many cases with engagement, Donnie, educators are having to realize, and I'm very excited that some school systems are using COVID funds and they're reallocating parts of their operating money to recognize that your job is not in many cases to just teach students. It's to teach families. It's to teach communities. And so even here in Richmond, Virginia, where the high school I taught at, as opposed to tearing that school down when a new high school was built just next door, which is what we did in Baltimore County many times, they're now using that high school as almost a community hub, where there's going to be adult GED classes in there, and there's going to be community healthcare services in there. There are going to be dental services in there, a food pantry in there. There are going to be opportunities during the weekend for individuals to get other self-taught opportunities and professional development opportunities. That's what school systems have to do now, in collaboration with their local governments, with their state governments, to say it's not okay for us just to focus on 8 hours within a day for young people, which in many cases might be 6 or it might be 7. Because in Baltimore County, Donnie, we had the shortest high school day in the state. And when I tried to change that almost became like an act of God. But if we look at things like that, and I'm not saying put more work on teachers, because one of the things that I know right now is teachers are overwhelmed. And if educators are not careful, we're not going to have teachers to fill classrooms in as little as 1 year. I'm saying that we need to be looking at our local leaders, our state leaders, where district superintendents can come in hand, central administration, principals, to say, how do we not just educate young people between the hours of X and X, but we really take our approach to education of knowledge, of wealth creation and wealth building, we take this to a greater scale and bring in communities and families and engage them as opposed to involving them. Last thing I'll say, Donnie, is that I was raised by a single mother, and unfortunately, who passed away in 2019. But I wouldn't say my mother was very involved. I would say she was highly engaged, though. My mother worked 3 jobs. She was not coming to a PTA meeting, and she just couldn't do it. And in many times, those PTA meetings will be at times where we knew that parents, in many cases, people know parents can't make it. But I knew every evening I needed to have that homework on the table. I knew every Saturday morning she was going to expect 30 minutes where I had to read to her and I had to talk to her about my week. Those were things that the school said, these are ways you can engage and be involved with us, but not necessarily be involved where you have to be with us every single day. School systems that are performing well, particularly as we open back up post-COVID, are those who are recognizing that it's just not students who are our target audience, it's families and communities.
Got one question for you, Doc. How do we get more Black men in the classroom? When I think back to my days in Matthew Henson Elementary School, I was just recounting the other day, my first grade, the second and third grade, the fourth grade, Black women teachers. And by the way, Baltimore City produced fine products. Now it's all about money and this and that. And I'm just, the difference between then and now, we had teachers that loved us. But we had this one teacher for the 5th and 6th grade, Mr. Kermit Williams. He was the one Black man teacher that I had in elementary school. And he had such a profound, distinct impact on my life. From the radio broadcasts in the back of the room to reports to just before going away to junior high school. And he said to the whole class, stay away from those funny smelling cigarettes. But I'm going to tell you the real truth, Dr. Dance. Matthew Crawford, Jonathan Spate, and Robert Harris, they were bigger than everybody else. We were in a 5th, 6th grade split. So they were 6th graders and they were bigger. So, wasn't no need squaring up with them because they were going to. But on multiple occasions, Mr. Williams politely reminded them of who was in charge. Now, of course, you can't even get close. You can't even stare at somebody's child hard these days without someone calling the police. How do we get more Black men in the classroom? All I'm saying is, with all due respect, this lady from another community is being pushed into my community. And what we're seeing is that these people from the majority community are quick to put out young men on Ritalin. Quick to say, he's hyper. When and I know, maybe they just want to go outside. Maybe they want to have band. We had an orchestra in Baltimore City in my day. An orchestra. Musical instruments. We had gym. You had to climb the rope all the way to the top. Even the fat girls, it wasn't about nobody got a break. What happened to when we started letting Teach for America and these other entities change the culture of education, Doc?
So, Donnie, I think you bring up a very good point around, how just do we get, Black men into our classrooms? And I think this is something that school systems across the country, as a matter of fact, I was just talking to a colleague of mine from Ferguson, Missouri about this just last week before they went on spring break. The reality is, diversity benefits all of us. And when people recognize the fact that when children of color, particularly Black children, see someone who looks like them in front of the classroom who are teaching, they are more likely to graduate and go on to be successful in a career choice that they're most passionate about because of that experience. White children and other children of color, when they see diversity in the classroom, they recognize that unites us and absolutely opens their eyes to recognizing that diverse perspectives are in fact out there. And it opens them up to listening to those as opposed to getting to this tug of war that we're in as a country that if you don't believe what I say, then I don't want to talk to you and either with me or you're against me, which I think is crazy because that's not how America actually gets better. But if we really want to get more people of color, particularly Black people in our classroom, we got to assess the conditions that will allow them to be successful once they get into our classrooms. One of the things people are always talking to me about is how do I recruit more teachers of color? And I always have to tell them, all right, you got to recognize how do you retain the teachers of color that you have? because you can't just recruit and not retain. But there's a level of recognizing conditions that exist on the ground that teachers of color are recognizing, and particularly Black teachers and Black men, of why do I put myself in that particular situation? There are many Black men who want to be in the classroom, who would love to be in the classroom, but because of whether it's licensing regulations that I think state governments will have to look at some particular point, that prohibits them from doing so. I had to make a point to someone just recently that if Freeman Rabowski, and he, Dr. Rabowski is a true mentor, a true friend of mine. I text him all the time. I'm congratulating him on his retirement right now. But if he wants to teach in Maryland's classrooms, according to Maryland's regulations right now, he could not do so. And not only that, if he wanted to go lead a school system or become a principal, he could not do so. And that's because of some of the licensing regulations that exist in some of the state legislatures. And I'm not just picking.
I got an idea, Dr. Dance. Why don't we do it just like we do for the jobs out Walmart? You go to the employees and say, hey, do any of your friends want to work here? That's the way they had been doing it. Hey, tell your friends to come here. And that way we keep it going. That's how they do in the other community. Now, when we do it, all of a sudden, there's a problem. I mean, I'm not blaming racism, but racism is still in our faces, and it impacts our mental health every single day, whether it's being a teacher or just, a regular person. And I know I got twisted there.
No, you're fine. You're fine. And I know exactly. Well, Donnie, I feel exactly what you're saying. So let me be clear. I'm not advocating that we need to lower expectations for teachers or anything like that. What I've been very clear with folks is that we need to have alternate pathways to licensure that really assesses and analyzes what it takes to be successful to teach students in classrooms. If Northrop Grumman, I'm gonna throw a, me, I'm a very big innovator. I'm an entrepreneur spirit, so I'm always trying to figure out how do we really solve a problem if we want to solve a problem. Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin, these are companies that actually make the U.S. successful, and they have individuals who are brilliant in math and science. If there were partnerships with both of those entities where they had individuals who wanted to teach for periods of a time, I don't understand why that should not be possible when you have, in many cases, individuals with PhDs in math and science. And some of these individuals, UMBC does this, one of the biggest, distributors of Black PhDs across the world. If those individuals wanted to teach one class, we should be allowing them to do it without regulations in place that would absolutely stop that. Employers would absolutely love that, and students of color, particularly Black students, would absolutely relish in that because they would then see future opportunities with individuals who are in front of them at that particular moment. But that's an outside of the box idea that many times as educators, we block ourselves into that. And so mentally, I think where you're talking about the structural racism elements that fall into play is when we're thinking about some of these licensure requirements, the assessment component for some of these licensure components absolutely have a systemic racist bias within those assessments. I think if you talk to people who have been denied or not able to get initial licensure, they'll tell you that one of the biggest roadblocks to that is passing the praxis, whether it's the math component, which in many cases goes back to Algebra 1, where it may be the reading or the English component. There are structural elements of racism that exist in any type of test construction or test bias that in many cases, unless we address it and admit that exists, we're only going to perpetuate the issue. But I think we have a point in our country right now, and I'm an optimist. I think we have a point in our country right now that as folks begin to get their own voice, as folks begin to get their own platforms, they're recognizing their worth, they're recognizing their purpose and their passion. People are beginning to speak up a little bit more. And so I become encouraged, Donnie, that as people want to talk about what they want to do more and more, we'll be able to break down more and more of these systems. But in communities where heads are in the sand, we're not willing to address it. We want to play to politics or only play to particular audiences that are on either the far one end of a spectrum or the far other end. At the end of the day, I'm still pretty optimistic that common sense will prevail and that we'll still continue to chip away and chisel our way to a point where racism becomes less of a barrier. But let me be clear, as we sit here today, it absolutely is a barrier. And we don't have to go far as to just turn on the TV and look at what Ketanji Brown Jackson or Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson just had to deal with over a period of 2 days, where you have a white man looking at her, telling her that she's articulate. how disrespectful and blatant overt racism you have when someone is giving you a compliment. And I've had this happen to me where it's almost like people don't expect Black people to understand and know how to speak, but they have to say that.
No,
So I think one can just look as far as that.
They actually know better. I mean, if they are any kind of student, they know they're being insulting. They know that when you turn the dollar bill over, the American dollar bill, you see that African pyramid on there. A lot of times, other people know of our greatness and they're fearful of it. I think the famous rap album, Fear of a Black Planet. But listen, as you were talking, what came to mind is this guy down the bottom, STEM City USA, Dr. Tyrone Taborn. He's been building a virtual world. And you talked about, not just Black male teachers, but you're talking about science, technology, engineering, and math. Lauryn Hill, in her album, Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, she had a quote written on there. She said, in my travels all over the world, I've come to realize that what differentiates one child from another is not ability, but access. Access to education, access to opportunity, access to love. When I think of when I first got to Poly in the 9th grade, coming from Lamel, I was an A student at Lamel, but if you know about Lamel, you know you better have a quick left hand.
Yeah.
When I got over to Poly, we had a little bit of algebra at Lamel. But when I got to Poly, me, an A student, man, I was pulling 16s and 32s, and people were making it seem like A squared plus B squared equals C squared was something beyond my abilities, or like the quadratic equation or physics, I equals E over R. Like these were things that I couldn't grasp, and I felt cheated. I wish somebody had given me more math, so then when I go to compete, I'm just as good as this other kid, because I know the only advantage he had was access. But I still internalized it, and I felt dumb. I never felt dumb. 16s, 32s. Oh my God. How do we reverse that? How do we undo that? How do we get young Black people more interested in building skyscrapers or quantum physics or Elon Musk's universe and all of that crypto? How do we do it?
Yeah. So I completely agree with Lauryn Hill. And let me be clear, it's one of the best albums. I have it on on my iPhone. And I tell you, Donnie, I probably listen to that probably once every 2 weeks, or at least one of her songs at least once a week, because it's a motivator. And it absolutely, as Black people, and especially me, who recognizes the shoulders of people whom I stand on, and the work that still has to continue, that those words can be uplifting and can give power and rejuvenation to the work, because it does get difficult. But she nailed it on the head. It is access. And I would have people who would say to me, like, where do you think you went wrong in Baltimore County? And I'd say that, look, I don't think I went wrong anyway. But what I can tell you, though, and I've had people who told me this, whether it was politicians, people who worked in the system, or parents, that the moment that Dr. Harrison always would say all means all. And the moment that I then started to build on that and actionalize that with policy that I was recommending to the board, with giving every student access to something, with saying that every high school was going to offer something, which saying that we were going to tear down, the teacher recommendation for going into a particular accelerated or advanced course. When you start talking about everyone getting access to something, there is this mindset that some people in our country believe, and there were absolutely people in Baltimore County who believe this, and you don't have to believe me. This is on the record for itself. They feel that someone has to lose in order for someone to gain. And that's asinine to me. It's crazy. But what I saw very clear from our data are that students of color, particularly Black students and Hispanic students and poor white students at the same time too, we were all creating barriers to access for many of those students. And those had to come down. And I believe that leadership absolutely has the ability to tear down barriers. And in many cases, when you tear down barriers, people, in fact, in some cases, come after you. And that's particularly fun when you can recognize that other kids would be successful, just like your own child is going to be successful because you've torn down those barriers. And when you're in positions of leadership, you know, in many cases, you're making decisions based on data that are in front of you, but you have to be grounded by a certain level of principles and values. And for me, I really do believe in the concept that Dr. Harrison said, for the county, all men's all. I just wanted to actualize that. And that's what we, in fact, ended up doing. But another way that we have to do that, too, is we have to change the mindset that exists for some of our educators. You know, people would say, what would you hire for as a principal? I hired for whether you had a growth mindset that our students could be successful. Yeah, content was important to me and all of that good stuff. But if you didn't think our kids could be successful, you couldn't be here. And so
they call it efficacy.
Absolutely, they do. Absolutely do. And so even as a parent, I had my own situation where, you know, my son's in 4th grade math, and he's a student who had to, in fact, you know, he had to work a little hard at it. I had to work a little hard at math. But when a teacher tells him, you know, hey, you got an 80, I think you did a really job. That's the best you could do on this one. That infuriates me. When a student hears that, obviously, we were talking about mental health earlier, your mental model then gets molded to where I'm only C-level work. Math is really not for me. I need to stick to this. And so that then perpetuates as a student goes into middle school, ultimately high school, because of something that someone said. And you know, I don't have to tell you what race that teacher was, but the reality is we've had Black teachers who've said things like that, white teachers, and so forth. Yes. So the power that teachers have of the tongue, and the power that each of us has with our tongue, is huge. And so we always have to watch our thoughts, as we were talking about earlier, because they become our words. And then followed by that, obviously, our words become our actions. But the power of the tongue can absolutely tear down someone, but it also, if used correctly, can tear down barriers too.
I know there's a poem, there's a verse, there's something that you've been reading that you can share with us to inspire us as we get ready for our morning. Is Ralph Waldo Emerson?
I read so much, Donnie. I probably have about 5 books on my nightstand right now, but I always go back to, and I say this to myself every morning. I say to myself, only God can judge me, because I'm going to walk in the lane that he has given to me. But I also say, to whom much is given, much is required. And so to me, what that states is that as God has given me a purpose and a passion, I have to walk in it. And I'm loving walking in it, because when you can walk in your purpose and your passion, Donnie, you're never working a day in your life. And the purpose and passion to work with young people, to work with people in general, but to really focus now on this whole idea around mental health, well-being, making sure that Black men, we're healthy, we're happy, we're successful, we are aware of ourselves and our surroundings. That's given me the opportunity then to go into this idea that to whom much is given, much is required, because I've had my own setbacks. I've had my own mental health challenges. And at the end of the day, I'm a better person because of it. And because of that too, I want to make sure that I connect people with other people that can give them the resources to be able to live the same purposeful, passionate life that I'm living now myself.
Any final thoughts?
Donnie, thank you for the opportunity. I do remember the event which you're talking about at the Reginald F. Lewis Museum. It was a great event. I remember what Dr. Ty is doing and the work with STEM, and he and I've had many opportunities to talk about how we even get more young people there. At the end of the day, man, we fall down, but we get up. And at the end of the day, there still is a level of grace that we always have to supply, not just to ourselves, but also to others, because everyone has their own level of baggage. We should never get to a point where we think that our baggage is lighter than anyone else's. We don't know what anyone else's story is, but the more we become aware of what our own story is and allow people, again, the grace to be able to share their story, we learn so much. Because I obviously do believe that there are more things that unites us than divides us. But that becomes when we actually are aware of our own stories, our own insecurities, our own issues and failures that we also have to live through, but we also allow people the space to be able to grow through their own experiences and evolve as well.
You know, what I remember about that evening is that Jimmy Britton had done the catering for Reginald F. Lewis. I remember you and I remember Scott, but I remember Jimmy Britton's teriyaki salmon more than everything.
I do remember that, Sam. I absolutely do. It was a great event, but the food was spot on. It was on 100 that night.
How can people find you, Dr. Dance? How can they get in touch with you?
Thanks, Donnie. On my backdrop, I have all the information to reach me. I'm still available on Twitter, on Instagram, but also if they want to email me, they can do info@drdallasdance.com. And I follow up with individuals, but I'm looking forward to obviously connecting with more people, and the work that we're doing right now, man, is transformational, and there's no stopping us now.
I just want to say this to you: fall down 7 times, get up 8. We've all fallen on our face, in public or in private. It don't matter, because the same God that sees us in public sees us in private. At some point, though, you are a fighter. You've come through Baltimore. You come out of Richmond. What were you going to do? Quit? You want to just stop? Oh, I don't want to educate anymore. Roar. Remember Cat Williams? Roar. You don't want to be a lion today. Roar. You got to roar.
You absolutely do. And kids need to see that. Again, I go back to Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson's statement yesterday. Kids have to see it. That's the only way that perseverance gets honed into someone's spirit, is they recognize and they see people, not people who are on TV and all this other stuff, but people they absolutely know, who've gone through trials and tribulations, they've gone through hardships, and they persevere through them. And the more and more kids see that, the more and more they recognize that they can be anything they want to be, regardless of where they see themselves today. It's not where they have to end.
Because one day they will get their turn.
Absolutely. And we need them to be prepared for that. And we need them, Donnie, to be prepared for that. And we do ourselves a disservice when we won't give them every single tool and skill in order to be fully prepared for that moment when they have to step into the shoes that we're in right now, and they're having to do even greater work than what we even have to do.
Most profound interview to date that I've done on this network. We've been on air since December 2020. And I can tell you, this is everything. You talked about dreams. This network here, what we're doing now, thanks to people like Dr. Tyrone Taborn, Michael Haney. We've got 19 shows around the country: Los Angeles, Oakland, Atlanta, New York, DC. All started with streaming. Couldn't go into the studio anymore, so the streaming thing. And so I'm reminded, too, that even for me, there's hope for me, that God has us here. There must be a purpose, and we got to find it.
Absolutely. We're right where he wants us to be, Donnie. We're right where he wants us to be.
Good deal. Have a beautiful day, and thank you for taking the time to meet with us.
Thanks, Donnie, for the opportunity. It's good to see you.
Yes, sir. Stay tuned, Baltimore World. We have William Honolulu coming on at 10 a.m. for BlackUSA.News Morning Show. My name's Donnie Glover. Top of the day to you.